Bun venit la o nouă ediție a emisiunii Ziua se apropie. În minutele care urmează vă prezentăm o ediție specială a Raportului European de la Bruxelles din ianuarie 2026, ediție prilejuită de criza din Iran și Venezuela. Pentru a înțelege derularea dramatică a acestor evenimente și modul în care acestea vor afecta Europa, Yossi Lempkowicz îi are ca invitați pe Rihards Kols, membru al Parlamentului European și al grupului politic conservator, și pe Tomas Sandell, directorul Coaliției Europene pentru Israel. Vizionare plăcută!
The new year 2026 could not have begun in a more dramatic way with two new world crises unfolding, one in Venezuela and especially one in Iran. As we meet today in the studio of the European Parliament here in Brussels for the first edition of the European report this year, it's still way too early to tell how each crisis, and especially Iran, will play out. In order to make sense of these dramatic developments in the world and understand how they will affect Europe, we have invited today member of the European Parliament, Rihards Kols from Latvia. Elected in 2024, he sits in the important European Parliament Foreign Affairs Committee and is a member of the European Conservatives and Reformist political group. He will be joined by our regular expert and commentator, Tomas Sandell, founding director of the European Coalition for Israel. My name is Yossi Lempkowicz and this is the European Report. MEP Kols, I will start with you. We are talking here about two major political implosions and uprising, but on two different continents and thousands of kilometers away from each other. But I would like to know, in what way would you say that these two stories are connected or not?
Well, actually, I've carefully listened to your introductory, and you mentioned the 2026 started with major crisis. And I would say the 2026 started badly for authoritarian regimes. And I would not necessarily label that as a bad sign. It's a good sign. It's crumbling. Authoritarian axis, be it Venezuela, be it Iran, be it Russia as well, because they're very much interconnected, intervened, coordinated. This is a big blow for Russia, for Putin. You saw that the security guarantees for Venezuela, right, vaporized, gone. The external intervention by US decapitating the head of the symbol of the regime is out, it's gone. Yes, the question is, it doesn't crumble the whole regime. No. Now the question is what will follow? And this is where Europe matters, our stance, our position, the call for immediate elections, transparency, all these things, which we can elaborate later on. On Iran, it was coming. It wasn't. I don't think it was a big surprise what is happening. The thing is that authoritarian regimes can no longer deliver prosperity and wealth. When they start to use repressions, oppressions, it's just a matter of time, and especially if they use violence, that they will shatter. And this is what's happening in Iran as well. People in their millions out in the streets. We see the regime is introducing all possible means to suppress any insurgency within the country altogether. But it's crumbling. It's obviously crumbling. And the notion, I think, what we can examine from the spread of the protests in Iran, we can compare in the previous ones, in 2022, if I'm not mistaken, with the students. This is a much grander scale. And this is also where it involves that the regime was hurt during their war with Israel. And that is still ongoing. This is something didn't just stop after 7 days. This is still ongoing. The regime is being crippled in a way the partnerships we see, even for Iran. There were some planes coming from Russia prior the protests emerged. Suspicion is delivering different equipment and tools to suppress the protesters. But we see a more bolder U.S. I think it's also first it was Venezuela with Maduro, special operation, military operation intervention, taking the Maduro out. That was a clear signal as well for Khamenei regime as well. Am I next? And you see from Trump's rhetoric, similar messages are coming out, especially from Rubio, the Secretary of State, saying Cuba should be worried. That's immediate neighborhood. But if we look further as well, right now, Trump said that U.S. is ready to support the protesters, especially if it sees that the IRGC, Iran's regime, is using lethal force against the protesters. And we see the reports coming out. There are in thousands already casualties, executions. Right now, there's planning public executions probably to suppress more the protesters. So this is a very pivotal moment. And the question is where Europe stands. What is our position? Sorry, but I'm very critical when I see the first reactions we're closely monitoring. Well, it's good to be behind the screen and monitor something. We have to be active on putting the pressure on the regime itself with sanctions, tailored, targeted sanctions to those who've been involved suppressing or imprisonments. The list is huge. So far, I understand the Kaja Kallas, High Representative, is about to introduce sanctions for the human rights violations. But again, should we had to wait for numerous casualties, civilian casualties, for us in order to make some actions?
We will speak about
sorry,
your
I kind
reactions.
of
We'll speak about your reactions later. But I would like to discuss with Tomas Sandell. In November 2024, we had a guest in the studio in the European Parliament, a guest from the Iranian opposition. And yourself, for many years, you have been very vocal on the issues related to Iran. What is your takeaway about the current ongoing uprising, which is different from previous protests by Iranians? The situation is completely different.
Thank you, Yossi. If I take one step back and I come to the same question as Mr. Kols answered, there is, of course, this connection. I think Anne Applebaum put it very well in her book, Autocracy Incorporated, this web of evil trading with each other. I mean, when you have China and Russia in the same boat, keeping Venezuela, keeping Iran and North Korea, Cuba, you name it, afloat, you have a huge market. And I think it also raises the issue of what many speaks about today as a rule of law-based international order. And I always raise the issue when people criticized Trump for taking out Maduro. I said, well, the correct way, according to international law, would of course have been to ask China and Russia in the Security Council for permission. And of course, that is never going to happen. So I think the first thing we have to state is that this international order is in disarray, and we'll need to have this discussion: what comes next and what will it look like. When it comes to Iran, of course, before I came into the studio, I heard the breaking news. They're now talking about 12,000 dead people already. And as there is this complete blackout, there's no way of verifying, could be even much more. But I agree with Mr. Kols. We can't just wait till the next morning and count the body counts and say, well, let's see now how am I going to tweet today. It won't change a thing with our crying, our sympathies. We need to go And I quote Roberta Metsola, we need to go from words to actions. And I think this is the only relevant discussion we can have at this point, because obviously no one would agree or no one would support with the cruelty of the current regime. But the question is, what can we do practically speaking? I would applaud the President, Roberta Metsola, for being so firm in I think it might be even an unprecedented step to ban Iranian diplomats and government officials from entering this very building. I think that sends a very clear signal as to where the European Parliament stands. But as you know, Rihards Kols, more than anyone else, there's a limitation as to what the European Parliament can do. So now, of course, our hope is to the 27 EU governments that they would quickly take action. And I'll be happy to elaborate later in the program what those actions could look like.
Yeah, because we saw also, there is also the idea of, for example, withdrawing EU ambassador from Tehran,
Yeah.
you know, because they are there. Why they are still staying? It's
Yeah.
also an option.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I was thinking. I think, you know, the EU doesn't have many military options, of course, but the diplomatic options to send a clear signal and to say that, you know, like the Finnish foreign minister did, the Dutch foreign minister did in the last few hours, to call up the Iranian ambassador for a reprimand. The next step would be to call home the respective ambassadors from Tehran and then to expel Iranian diplomats. This is something actually that the chair of the Iran delegation here in the European Parliament, Hannah Neumann, has already suggested, and I would highly recommend that.
MEP Kols, the European Parliament, of course, has been closed over the holidays while there was these important events unfolding. I'm sure that you have followed the situation closely. And be back with what you said about the EU reaction. Are you happy with how High Representative Kaja Kallas has reacted so far? And you mentioned the proscribing the IRGC, the Islamic Republic Guards Corps, which is the core of the regime in Tehran. Is it a good idea? No, because it has been discussed for many years.
It's always a good idea until it's implemented. We see the latest country to do that was Canada, designate the IRGC as a terrorist entity. We saw the reply from Iran designating Canadian or something as a terrorist, or something like that was. If we're afraid of such a retaliation from the regime, oh my God, they can label as much different names they want, but they don't have tools to enforce then later on this sanction. Because if you're labeled as a terrorist entity, that is their pyramid that they have built up from top down. IRGC is not just a military entity. It's a construction company for Iran, Islamic State. It's in business. It's in so many things. It has tentacles in different parts of the world, in the Middle East, in Europe. And if you designate it as a terrorist entity, there's a lot of limitations, legal limitations that can be enforced both on IRGC, but broadly on the regime in general. So this is a must from the European Parliament. You asked about Kaja Kallas and her action. I would assess that her position so far has been way clearer than her predecessors. Related, yeah, exactly. Just compare. Oh my God, it's a day and night. Of course, I would love to see way more, but she doesn't take decisions on her own.
Of course.
She has to go to the council and then 27. And I think that the immediate steps to introduce, and this is something the human rights violations, it's another instrument, Magnitsky Act, which is called, under which you can put hundreds of regime supporters or participants under direct sanctions. I would say not only them, but their relatives. I'm certain that certain regimes, perpetrators, actors, if they're sanctioned because they're directly being involved in violence against the civilians or executions and etc., their relatives, their children are studying in Europe, in Paris, in Rome.
London.
They should be feeling the consequences of their actions also there. So that should be broadly. Of course, we'll be advocating that to be applied for the Russia as well, war criminals and etc. and so forth. So for immediate effects, if I only can compare Kaja Kallas to her predecessors, and she's been way clear on Europe's position as a whole, but still way more to be seen. What was rightly mentioned, that it's enough with the wording and empathy, which it's needed, and sympathies for the Iranian people who are struggling now for their freedom, to actually move to the actions. And actions is not only sanctions, but empowerment of people, because what Iran regime is doing right now is a blanket information operations, like cutting out, blackout across Iran, no communications. We have the tools, technological tools. Starlink is providing free of charge over Iran the Starlink connection. Yes, Iran is already introducing different blocking devices and so on, but they cannot block entirely everyone. So any opportunity
China is helping.
Sorry?
China is helping them.
Probably. I don't have evidence, but my guess would be yes, they're maybe not directly involved, like same with Russia, Russia's war in Ukraine. They're not providing lethal weapons, they're providing dual-use technology and whatnot, but still they are supportive of what Russia doing in Ukraine. The same applies with Iran's regime. We see the vital corridor for shipping, Hormuz Strait as well. We see the oil that comes from Iran, 90% goes to China. Obviously, for China, it's crucial that this still flows. So there's a lot of players in place, and we should be very robust when we articulate our position, but less about, behind the closed doors debating, but introduce what is being called by the European Parliament on so many occasions in our resolutions.
And you mentioned that Kaja Kallas needs the agreement of 27 countries. The next meeting of the Foreign Affairs Council is on the 29th of January. Can we wait until then to
always
decide?
You can call for extraordinary meeting. That's another option.
Absolutely. Tomas Sandell, you have covered EU affairs for more than 25 years, as far as I know. You can perhaps compare EU reactions to similar events over time, such as the Arab Spring, the 9/11. To use a common metaphor, is the European Union today standing on the right side of history when it relates to Iran?
Well, history is unfolding as we speak, and I just have this sense of how historic this is, because in my generation we would always ask, so where were you when the Berlin Wall came down? And we would know exactly. I wouldn't be surprised if our children would ask this question: where were we when the people of Iran brought down this evil regime? And I'm also old enough to remember pre-1989, because then we said it's completely impossible that Soviet Union would ever crumble. It cannot happen. The more academic titles you had, the more sure you were that it could not happen, but it did happen nevertheless. So I would want to go back to the Arab Spring, because I think at that time the European Union did some fundamental mistakes. And this is also when you misread history, because no one thought at the time that these tyrants and dictators like Gaddafi would come down. So just a few weeks before the Arab Spring, he was received here in the European Parliament, red carpet treatment, and then a month later, it was such an embarrassment. Not to be self-critical when it comes to Finland, but the Iranian ambassador, who has been persona non grata for many years at the most prestigious event in Finland, which is the independence reception all of a sudden he was invited back just a few weeks ago. I feel sorry for our president, how he's going to look back and say, well, how did he misjudge? But now history is unfolding. I think that I'm proud of what Roberta Metsola has done. I think one thing in addition to what has been mentioned need to happen now, and that is every revolution, every uprising needs a figurehead. You can't think of South Africa, the new South Africa, without Nelson Mandela. You can't think of what happened in Poland without Lech Walesa. The list goes on. Sakharov in Soviet Union. Gorbachev as well. But that means that the sooner the Europeans can recognize that now there is a uniting leader for the opposition, the stronger and the more empowered the uprising will be, the more empowered the people will be. And if you have followed media coverage for the last 10 days, there is only one name that keeps popping up. The same is true on the streets in not only Tehran, but across the nation, Reza Pahlavi. That doesn't mean the Crown Prince, Reza Pahlavi, that doesn't mean that he or the people who support him are trying to reestablish a monarchy. That needs to be decided in democratic elections by the people. But I think that there's a precedent. Looking at what happened in Spain, when Spain went from fascism to constitutional monarchy, they needed a figurehead. In this case, it was Juan Carlos. It worked out very well. And I think that Iran would need such a stabilizing force at this time. And he is prepared. He has a plan of what would happen the first 100 days so you can hit the ground running. So my very concrete message to Roberta Metsola, to Kallas, to Ursula von der Leyen, sit down with the leader of this opposition. The sooner you do it, the more clear it will have been that you read this situation correctly compared to the Arab Spring.
It's interesting what you say because you know that there were questions to the European leaders. Why do you have contact with Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi? There was no answer. They declined to give a clear answer, like we know that President Trump met with the Crown Prince, but here nothing happened. While, as you said, it's the most prominent figure now in the Iranian opposition. So your message is important, I think, to the European leaders.
Well, it's a good point because we see that European leaders are ready to meet the Russian opposition, Belarusian opposition, on monthly basis, really coordinate efforts and so on. This is a valid question. With a Crown Prince, if I'm not mistaken, he has been to this house, visiting with political groups. MEPs do engage through either correspondence and so on, coordination. We get more information as well from the Iranian opposition. Of course, you have to be careful as well, not to fall into Bild's IRGC kind of, they label as opposition and whatnot. That same applies to Russian opposition as well. There's even within the Russian opposition, there are Russian imperialists as well.
Yeah, of course.
And you have to be careful. But this is something that it's also similar right now. And the question is, how are we going to articulate our position towards Iran? What might come out, even if the regime falls? What are the expectations? Because when it comes to Venezuela, Trump mentioned he doesn't consider the opposition leader to even consider taking over or interim government or whatnot. He said, no go. It's not going to happen. We're going to govern. I mean, that is a slippery slope. That is really slippery slope when it comes also to international law and etc. So the question is, in Venezuela's case, right now sworn in interim president, vice president, is she ready to organize under international observation elections conducted to international standards, including also those millions of refugees that have left Venezuela in the past 5 to 6 years, that resides in various Latin American countries as well, because they have the right to vote as well. They left because of the regime oppression. So there's a lot of unknowns, but those are preconditions. Those should be also preconditions for EU to engage in whatever way with the interim president of Venezuela. Not otherwise, it's just the same regime with a different title, and modus operandi not necessarily changes. With Iran, it's slightly different. We know that's a regime for decades already with this clear signature. We see that fooling around international community when it comes to their nuclear program as well. That should be also somewhere the red line should be drawn as well for their ambitions. So I think we had our inverted commas interesting times, and of essence is going to be how we not only react but how we act. That is the most important, because you asked about the comparisons on the Arab Spring over there as well. In this case, Europe wants to be on the right side of the history, but it often arrives late and with half measures. And that's the issue, and it's also the Arab Spring showed what happens when West hesitates, and later it's too late to engage, and then those surprised emotions. Oh, how come? No, it was in front of your eyes. It was there. You didn't took any action. You waited out, and now, it is what it is.
So action is needed. And I would like to turn to you, Tomas Sandell. Which action the European Union should take now to change the situation in Iran?
No, I think it's a repeat of what I have said. I think it's very clear there are clear diplomatic measures that can be taken, that should be taken. But for me, it's pivotal that we recognize that these are not just people running around without a leader. There is a leader. We should recognize the leader, sit down. That will be a game changer. What I would say, because time is running out, is also that when we look at 1989, we had a Reagan, we had a Thatcher, we had a John Paul II.
Yeah.
His message to the people at the time, which were very similar, was do not fear. Do not fear. My message to the Iranian people today would be the same. And I would add, because many who are watching this program are people of faith that believe in people power, believe in prayer. Stalin, when they were making reference to the Pope at the time, Stalin said, well, how many legions do the Pope have? Of course, he didn't have any legions, but there is power when people come together in unity. And I would say, as a man of faith, when they pray, things happen, walls crumble down. And may it be the case these next days and weeks.
So your message today to the Iranian people is do not fear.
Do not fear.
Your message in 1 minute to the Iranian people from the European Parliament.
Well, I would say that's the first message. You should really, Iranians have shown the world that this regime does not represent the Iranian nation. That is very important, very important. It's the legitimacy of the regime. The second one, a leadership that for the survival uses violence is finished. It has no future whatsoever. Now the reports coming out, I don't think even the Iranian people can kind of register, okay, it happened and we're just going to forget and live alone. No. And last but not least, keep organizing, be organized, keep documenting. That is very important. And keep demanding the future that belongs to you, not to the people with weapons.
That was all for this edition of the European Report. Thank you both to MEP Rihards Kols and Tomas Sandell for this very interesting discussion on the latest developments on the world stage, particularly in Iran. My name is Yossi Lempkowicz. This was the European Report. See you again next month.
Emisiunea Ziua se apropie, se încheie aici. Vă mulțumim pentru atenție și vă dăm o nouă întâlnire săptămâna viitoare la aceeași oră. Sunt Codruța Burghelea, vă spun la revedere și Dumnezeu să vă binecuvânteze!